بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. أما بعد، أصحاب السعادة، السيدات والسادة، ضيوفنا الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. طاب مساءكم بكل خير. يسر مركز نمو السياحة من صندوق التنمية السياحي أن يرحب بكم هذا المساء ليطلق وإياكم أولى جلسات الإبداع والابتكار، حيث سنتعمق اليوم بإذن الله في التعرف على المفاهيم الرئيسية مثل مفهوم الإبداع والابتكار، وأيضا فهم الطريقة التي تعمل بها عقولنا، مثل التفكير بالشق الأيسر وأيضا التفكير بالشق الأيمن من العقل، وأيضا أنماط التفكير والعديد من المفاهيم والإثراء المعرفي في الجلسة الأولى والثانية أيضا غدا بإذن الله. في البداية وقبل أن نبدأ نلفت انتباهكم إلى إمكانية توفر الدورة باللغتين العربية والإنجليزية، ولإضافة خيار الترجمة يمكنكم الضغط على خانة الكرة الأرضية بالأسفل لديكم، ثم اختيار اللغة المفضلة أو اللغة العربية بالتحديد. بداية اسمحوا لي أن نرحب بالسيد خوسيه مانويل أباروا، أصله من إسبانيا ونشأ في لندن ودرس شهادته الجامعية في جامعة دورهام والقانون في لندن. يعمل حاليا في أكسنتشر كجزء من فريق الابتكار في مدريد، وتخصص في مجموعة متنوعة من المبادرات التي تركز على السياحة. الآن يتحدث إليكم السيد خوسيه.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the first session on creativity and innovation for the Tourism Development Fund Business Hub for SMTEs. Today, we're going to have a quick look at an introduction first, to put everyone in context of what's going on. Then we're going to look at the key concepts. And finally, we're going to take a look at the creativity techniques, how we can go about creating a creativity session, and what are the steps required in order for an innovation session to take place. So, why is it important to be creative and innovate in the tourism industry? There can be no doubt that innovation has always been an essential part of the tourism sector. Innovation within the tourism sector is of paramount importance when it comes to generating value and transforming the business model towards a more sustainable and lasting one. The goal should be to focus on quality tourism rather than quantity tourism, as this will not only generate greater profitability, but it will also make tourism more recurrent. Additionally, the tourism sector is currently in such a precarious situation that innovation has gone from being an option to being an obligation, as is this the only way of maintaining a competitive edge in the tourism market. So why is the tourism industry in such a precarious situation as of late? I'll give everyone maybe 10, 15 seconds to have a quick think of maybe a reason why the tourism industry is in a precarious situation. I've written down that the main reason has to be the expansion of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has taken place on a global scale. However, there are ways to boost the tourism sector through 5 drivers, which we're going to have a look at now. Firstly, we have reactivation, which is a priority in the tourism industry nowadays. Restarting tourism must come together with a value proposition where health and safety can be assured. In order to achieve this goal, a key element is trust, which is a second driver. Coming up with new strategies and actionable tactics in order to build more trusted travel experiences, along with how well we articulate communication, will be of paramount importance. Additionally, receiving feedback from a variety of different travelers will prove to be invaluable when it comes to ascertaining the needs of new demands. Therefore, creating inclusive tourism, which is our third driver, is imperative, as it will undoubtedly increase potential business opportunities within the industry. Additionally, we are seeing how sustainability, which is our fourth driver, is going from simply being an idea and turning into a profitable principle for tourism. The final driver that will dramatically transform the tourism industry is technology. We live in a digital economy where there are plenty of tools at our disposal, but simultaneously, there are also threats that need to be acknowledged and which we must be prepared for. Now let's look at the concepts. Before we go any further, we must first establish what we mean by creativity. Creativity is the process of developing and expressing new ideas. The ideas generated during this process lay the foundation for innovation to take place. An idea is nothing more than a mental representation that arises from a person's imagination. I think we can all agree that most people rely fundamentally on reasoning on a day-to-day basis. But how many rely on their imagination? I would assume that not many. The imagination is a cognitive process that allows individuals to manipulate intrinsically generated information in order to create a representation that is perceived through the senses of the mind. Imagination is the catalyst that transforms knowledge into new ideas. Without it, it is totally impossible to perform this action. So this is a quote from Pablo Picasso, which I'd like everyone to bear in mind as we make our way through the next couple of slides. And here it is. All children are born artists. The problem is how to remain artists as they grow up. For a long time, it was thought that creativity was an attribute that a person simply had. You were either born creative or you were not. It was thought that for those individuals who were born creative, they had these moments of inspiration that would simply arise unexpectedly and would be impossible to replicate. Therefore, the myth that there are some very creative people and other not very creative people was born. However, this notion that we are either born as creative people or not, and that somehow this defines how creative someone can be, is simply not true. There are many ways of being intelligent, as there are many different types of intelligence. This concept was published by Howard Gardner in 1983, and according to him, there are 12 types of intelligence. We have things such as collaborative intelligence, emotional intelligence, creative intelligence, existential intelligence, and so on. Intelligence is a combination of two key factors. We have talent and skill. Talent is something which you are born with. It is an innate quality which is deeply rooted in our genetics. However, skills are things that can be acquired through hard work and determination. As I just mentioned, creativity is a type of intelligence, and again, it is a mixture of both talent and skill. Therefore, it is something that can be practiced, it is something that can be taught, and it is most certainly something that can be learned. Although everyone is born with many creative abilities, very few of us exercise them enough throughout our lives. And in order to be creative, it is not enough to just settle for whatever creative traits we are born with. We need to exercise and train the brain with creative techniques. Now, I want everyone to have a quick think about at what point during our lives do you think you were the most creative? Give everyone maybe, again, another 15, 20 seconds to have a quick think about it. The answer is during our childhood. We spend the beginning of our life trying to leave behind our childhood in order to become more responsible, mature adults. We strive to become those responsible, independent adults we have always admired, only to realize that we have lost along the way everything that was really special and quite fun. There are so many things we can learn from children, from their attitude towards life, the way they face their problems, their decisiveness. Again, going back to that Picasso quote, a creative adult is a child who has survived. Undoubtedly, our brain as a child is more creative as a result of its development. In our childhood, our brain is configured through language. For this reason, learning several languages during childhood develops a multi-configured and more flexible brain. During the first years, our brain is exploratory, curious, and imaginative, but little by little it is formed, leaving creativity in the background. Some of you may be asking, what is the best context for a child's creativity? Well, the answer is boredom. A bored child explores his imagination and perceives his inner senses. Creativity is in danger in a society where there is an abundance of external distractions. We'll now take a look at how the brain works. During the last few years, research on the brain has advanced at a rapid pace. Many researchers have supported the theory that each section of the brain has a specific function. The consensus is that the left side of the brain is orientated towards more rational, structured, logical, and mathematical thinking, whereas the right side of the brain is more in touch with the emotional, perceptive, experimental, and in a way, creative side of our personality. In the 1960s, the American neuroscientist Paul MacLean formulated the triune brain model, which states that the brain is split into three distinct regions. MacLean's model suggests that the human brain is organized into a hierarchy, which itself is based on evolutionary views of brain development. The three regions are as follows. We have the reptilian brain, the limbic system, and the neocortex. According to MacLean, the hierarchical organization of the human brain represents the gradual acquisition of the brain structures through evolution. The triune brain model suggests that the reptilian brain was acquired first, which is thought to be in charge of our primal instincts, followed by the limbic system, which is in charge of our emotions, and finally the neocortex, which is thought to be responsible for rational or objective thought. MacLean's model claims that activity in the three brain regions is largely distinct when we are engaged in each other's mental activities, as outlined above. For example, when we are in danger, we must respond quickly as an act of self-preservation. The reptilian structure is aroused, preparing us for action by initiating the release of chemicals throughout the body. When we are watching a shocking news story or receive an upsetting message, the limbic system is stimulated, and again, chemicals are released, which create our experience of emotions. Finally, when we are making decisions, solving problems, or reasoning, the neocortex is engaged, without the involvement of the other brain structures. Modern advances in brain imaging have shown various regions of the brain are active during primal emotional and rational experiences. These findings have led to the rejection of MacLean's notion of a triune brain in neuroscience. However, while this model is undoubtedly an oversimplification, the concept of a triune brain provides us with a useful way of assessing human analysis of sensory information, in addition to the relationship between the structure and the functions of the human brain. Now, I'd like everyone to have a quick think at what point in the day they feel most creative. Again, maybe 15, 20 seconds. Well, our brain has two configurations called the phase locking and the phase lag locking. In the first stage, large groups of neurons come into action at the same frequency, millions of neurons beating according to a perfect rhythm. In the second, which is what actually occurs in the dream activity, in the REM sleep phase, the neurons receive acetylcholine into the medulla oblongata and activate each other indiscriminately, sending out electrical bursts that spread throughout the brain. In this way, memories and associations appear chaotically, but also unexpectedly. In the dream phase, our brain is tremendously creative because it is a time when there is a lot of activity going on in the brain. This leads us to two ways of thinking. We have vertical thinking and we have lateral thinking. When we speak of vertical thinking as that which we use for the ability to order, discriminate, evaluate, select among the available alternatives. In general terms, it is used to solve very well-defined and delimited problems where the solution is almost unique. This thinking moves in a single known direction, univocal and linear. Although we know that life is almost never like that, and there are often many answers to problems, this type of thinking allows us to choose the answer that was elaborated in the first instance, and that according to our knowledge and experience is adequately adapted to the problem at hand. The concept of lateral thinking was created by the Maltese psychologist, physician, and writer Edward de Bono, and we can define it as a mental process different from the deductive one. This is the name given to a type or way of thinking that seeks to analyze problems from different perspectives. It is not restricted to a single view or to those traditionally accepted ones. It is open to every idea, even if they seem absurd at first. Lateral thinking always acts by removing established assumptions, disarticulating known schemes, making rigid positions more flexible, and always opening unlimited paths towards the original, no matter how unusual they may seem. So we'll take a look at how lateral thinking works here. So lateral thinking tries to find the imaginative, different solutions, and depart from the classic head-on approach of an everyday problem. This is manifested in the so-called puzzles or exercises, where the solution generally is not precisely the most expected one. So I'm going to pose an example here. A woman enters a shop and a salesman proclaims, "This parrot is capable of repeating everything it hears." But a week later, the lady who brought it back to the store protested that the parrot wouldn't say a single word, and yet the salesman hadn't lied to her. How can we explain this? Again, I'll give everyone maybe 20, 30 seconds to have a think. There's no wrong answer here. The idea here is to think laterally and try to come up with different answers or different solutions other than the salesman was lying. So the solution I've come up with is that the parrot was deaf. But of course, due to lateral thinking, there are a plethora of different answers. Now, being a genius is no easy task. However, there are a series of requirements that can help us enhance our creativity and reach new challenges. Firstly, we have curiosity. Curiosity is essential when it comes to acquiring knowledge. A person who lacks curiosity will struggle to broaden their knowledge. Mastering a wide spectrum of knowledge through our curiosity beyond our area of specialization is our greatest asset. Curiosity leads us to ask ourselves why and find the answer. For example, Edward Jenner, who was a British physician and scientist who pioneered the concept of vaccines, including the creation of the smallpox vaccine, which was the world's very first vaccine. Jenner is often called the father of immunology, and his work is said to have saved more lives than the work of any other human. In Jenner's time, smallpox killed around 10% of the population, with the number as high as 20% in towns and cities where infection spread more easily. Secondly, we have observation. This action allows us to further our knowledge, to delve into the detail, to discern in the nuances. The superficial is not going to make a difference. The difference is in the depth. In a society where superficial thinking prevails, being deep is massively advantageous. Again, if we take an example, in 1929, Alexander Fleming was studying bacteria when he departed for London for almost a month. He forgot a petri dish containing bacteria near an open window. On returning to his experiment, he found that his experiment had gone awry, as his samples had become contaminated with a kind of mold that had blown in with the wind. Fleming could have thrown the samples away, but his curiosity led him to observe them under the microscope. Thirdly, we have practice. Learning to change the way we think will help us find new solutions. However, like any skill, having the best tools will not make us geniuses. Sustained practice over time is what will determine our level of skill and effectiveness. As with sport, if we exercise regularly, tasks will become easier every day. That is why it is important to dedicate a few minutes a day to our creative mind. An example here is Christian Barnard, who was a South African cardiac surgeon who performed the world's first human-to-human heart transplant operation in 1967, which naturally was a great medical achievement. But you might be asking yourselves, why him and not another? Well, among the many reasons is the fact that he trained every surgical gesture for his transplant more than 1,000 times with dogs. And finally, we have time. Our last requirement here is time. Nowadays, we have so many distractions, it is impossible to concentrate on something. We simply do not dedicate enough time to anything. It is important to reserve space and time for creative thinking in order to find a place where we feel comfortable to generate ideas. It is no coincidence that the most innovative companies have spaces that stimulate the generation of ideas for their employees. Again, if we look at an example here, Jeff Bezos is currently investing in a clock that can run without maintenance for 10,000 years. With such a clock, there are millennia instead of hours, centuries instead of minutes, and years instead of seconds. The objective of such an undertaking is to try to inspire others to create value over which time has no power. The geniuses of our history have all faced rejection by society, and many of their innovations were scorned. Today, many innovators can admire the impact their ideas have had on the world soon after they were created. However, they still face some of the barriers that the great geniuses had to deal with. The first barrier facing the creative process is education. Until a few decades ago, education followed a linear system motivated by mass production and where the career plan was developed in a single company. However, society has undergone a change of value over the last few years, in which not only have companies and human resource management changed, but also the habits and needs of professionals. This change in behavior needs to be accompanied by a revolution in education. We have an educational system inherited from the past that prepares people to work in a traditional organization. Many of the current educational systems are based on imposing the way of being intelligent and not on discovering the architecture of thought of the students. Our education is not limited only to our school and university stage, but this lasts throughout our lives and is very intense in the professional stage. We also find ourselves in a society with prejudices and ever-increasing expectations, pushing us to have more and more things in a world of limited resources. Our value is determined by our possessions and not by our character. However, satisfaction is short-lived, and we will soon feel the need to fulfill new expectations, which has contributed to the creation of social inequalities. Now, there are some misconceptions that have been generated about creativity, and we're going to look at a few of them now. The first one is the smarter you are, the more creative you will be. Intelligence is only related to creativity up to a certain point. Once you have sufficient intelligence to do your job, the relationship does not hold. That is, above an IQ of around 120, there is no correlation between intelligence and creativity. Another misconception is that young people are more creative than older people. Age is not a clear indicator of creative potential. Research shows that it generally takes 7 to 10 years to become an expert in a given field. Experience allows us to observe aspects that would go unnoticed by a beginner. Thus, creativity can be found in people of any age range. However, experience can also inhibit creativity, as experts can sometimes have difficulty seeing or thinking beyond the established patterns. Another misconception we have is that creativity is only reserved for a few, those who go for the extravagant. The willingness to take risks and the ability to think outside the box play an important role in creativity. However, this does not mean that creativity is limited to those who take high risks. Another misconception is that creativity is an essentially individual activity. A large percentage of the most relevant innovations are not the results of the individual work of a genius, but of the collaboration of a group of people with complementary skills. Most innovations are only achieved through the work of a large team after much effort and overcoming obstacles. Even the work of the isolated genius is the result of the work of others who came before him and gave their knowledge and experience. And a final misconception that we have is that creativity cannot be managed. It is true that it is not possible to know in advance what or who will be involved in a creative process, how that process will unfold, or where and how it will occur. However, managers can create conditions that will favor creativity. And well, how can they do this? I'll give everyone maybe 10, 15 seconds to have a quick think about how managers can go about doing this. Well, there are several ways they can go about doing this. They can determine the composition of a work group. They can enrich the work environment, both the physical and the psychological, provide tools and techniques that favor the generation of ideas, manage the innovation process so that the best ideas and knowledge are transferred into products, services, and innovative ideas. And this leads us to arguably one of the most important takeaways from today's session, which is what exactly is innovation? Innovation is to find a new idea and turn it into value. That is the innovation part of it. But let's start from the basics. What does it mean to innovate? Innovate comes from the Latin innovare, which means becoming new, renewing or introducing a novelty. Innovation, as I just mentioned, is the generation of ideas, selecting them, implementing them, and giving them value. Ideas are the origins of any innovation project. Therefore, it is necessary to start with a good idea for a project to be successful. However, it is not enough to have a single idea to achieve an innovation project. It is necessary to have hundreds, even thousands of ideas to increase the probability of success. Value is the result and is the hardest thing to capture in the market. But what exactly is value? It is a term that we continually hear, but there is not always a clear definition. Of all the definitions proposed by businesses and non-business literature, it is undoubtedly the one proposed by the scholastic school of the late Middle Ages that is the most accurate. The concept of value is broken down into two. We have intrinsic value and extrinsic value. Intrinsic value is the inherent in each product or service. How much does it cost to develop that product or service? Whereas the intrinsic value is the one that the market is willing to pay for. And this value has three key attributes. Firstly, its singularity. Is it unique? Is there an abundance of it? Secondly, how useful is it? And thirdly, is it appreciated within the wider community? So how can we leverage business opportunities? Innovation arises from applying the knowledge we have about different areas of a company and applying creativity to take advantage of all the businesses and growth opportunities available to us. To do so, we must take into account things such as new trends, traditional methods, client needs, alternative business models, new technologies, processes and assets, and so on. Now, as we continue to make our way through innovation opportunities, I want to read out a quote here from Paul Krugman, who was the winner of the 2008 Nobel Prize in Economics, who says that innovation can help the world economy because it creates investment opportunities, and that is precisely what the market needs. This is obviously very positive. However, we live in a world where the speed at which we are innovating has reduced the life cycle of products and services such as Trivago and Kayak. There can be no doubt that when companies such as Trivago and Kayak first came into existence, they would have been considered to be extremely innovative. However, with time, they have been left in the background. Then from time to time, you get an innovation that is completely disruptive. A clear example of this is Airbnb. Airbnb had such an impact on the market when it was created that it has to be considered a disruptive innovation. We live in a world in which we strive for comfort. Therefore, commoditization is occurring at a much faster pace, even in newly created industries. An example of this is Ryanair. Ryanair prides itself on always being on time, as well as having very affordable prices, hence why many people choose to fly with them. Having said all this, it is abundantly clear that technological development, customer behavior, and competitive intensity have dramatically increased, making the importance of innovation in business a key factor. So we're going to take a quick look at a business model. So we start obviously with the product, the services, then we move on to the platforms, the marketing, the branding, the channels, and finally the client experience. Given that we're focusing on tourism today, it comes as no surprise that we have things such as Four Seasons, Airbnb on the business model. However, some of you may be slightly curious as to why we have Netflix. And I find this one particularly interesting because Netflix is a master at doing tourism product and service placement. So if you're watching a Netflix show, suddenly there'll be a huge advertisement for a particular product, maybe a particular island, a particular beach, and all of this helps with the tourism sector, helps with the propaganda, helps with advertising, which I always thought was interesting. And now we're going to take a look at a quick video. It's not too long. Hopefully everyone can hear it. So here we go. Cool. I hope everyone found that video interesting. And this leads us to talk about orthodoxies. So what exactly is an orthodoxy? An orthodoxy is a belief or a way of thinking that is accepted as true or correct when this is not always the case. We must challenge orthodoxies by taking an industry and examining it from an internal perspective. It is worthwhile challenging our existing business models and the conventional wisdom of the industry by turning orthodoxies on their head. This will permit us to create a set of useful orthodoxy insights which will be used to help us create unique business opportunities. So let us take a look at an example of an orthodoxy. So what if we were to take tourism as a consumer product? What would it look like? Imagine a wide range of tourist services such as accommodation, activities, meals that came in different boxes which you could simply pick up off a shelf. These gift boxes would have to be regarded as some of the best Christmas and birthday presents, especially now that Christmas is right around the corner. Having these boxes presented in large stores and technological stores would facilitate higher consumption. But what does the process exactly look like? Well, this is what the innovation process looks like. Firstly, we have to ideate, to come up with the ideas, then design, how we're going to design it. Then we have to build our idea, of course, and then scale it and get it off to our client, the consumer, and so forth. This is a more graphic view of the diagram. So we start with a bunch of ideas at the start, hence why the bubbles are slightly larger, and they filter through the system until at the end we arrive with our most innovative idea, which hopefully will be our new product, a new business, something that is never seen before, and something that hopefully will revolutionize the space. And this leads us to another key takeaway from today's session, which is that failure is an inevitable part of the innovation process. Generally, a success is always preceded by some sort of failure. Watch a child and you will see that he learns without fear of failure, touches a smartphone without thinking that something strange might happen, takes a risk, tries, fails, and learns much faster from experience. Innovation is a change that generates value, changes a risk and possibility of failure. If you do not take risks, it will be more difficult to win. The worst possible scenario is to be left with a feeling that you could have done more. The culture of an innovation organization must be open to failure and risk. Innovating implies taking risks and making mistakes. We must accept failure and tolerate errors. A management that does not accept failure as something inherent to innovation is doomed to fail. In the business world, we also find cases where learning from failures leads to great innovations. In 1987, Apple started the Newton project, a line of PDAs that was a great failure. In 2010, Apple decided to resume the project with technology based on Newton's development and launched the iPad, which of course has been a tremendous success. So innovation according to the competitive advantage it grants and the impact of the market is considered but to be incremental, differential, and disruptive, as we see in this diagram here. And now we're going to fill it up with a few examples. So for example, we've already spoken about Airbnb. When it came into existence, it had a huge impact on the market and of course was regarded to be a tremendously disruptive innovation. Obviously, its competitive advantage has diminished over time, given the stiffer competition nowadays. But when it first came to existence, it would have been right up there as competitive advantage, as well as having a massive impact on the market. And this leads us to our third and final section of today's presentation, which is creativity techniques. We're going to have a look at how I would structure a creativity session, the steps, how to define the key roles, and so forth. So for a creativity session to go as planned, it is necessary to establish a series of rules and recommendations. These should be presented to the participants before starting to generate ideas. So we have things such as all criticism is forbidden, all ideas are welcome, we must be prepared to be creative, we must dare to be irrational, we must write down all the ideas, and maybe most importantly, we must have fun and enjoy it. So let's take an example. Let's put an example that this boat here is drowning and we need to save as many people as possible. The initial vertical thinking, which we spoke about earlier, vertical and lateral thinking, would be to pack as many people into lifeboats. However, there is more than one approach to saving these people. There are more options. So I've listed out here some of the resources we have. So maybe shelves, wooden boards, cars. I'll give everyone maybe 10, 15 seconds to come up with different options of how they could save the people on board. And then we'll take a look at it together. So if I were to adopt a more lateral way of thinking, I come to the conclusion that there are more options than just placing people in lifeboats. So for example, we could build platforms between the ships, build platforms with the wheels of the cars that are maybe on board, use wooden boards, shelves, anything that we can use to stay afloat. So what are the steps for creating a creativity session? How can we structure a session such as a creativity session? Generating ideas that are truly valuable and provide innovations is more than just sitting down to see what comes to mind during a brainstorm. There are 10 key steps which we can follow. Firstly, we must define the focus. It is convenient to define a list of problems to be able to select the main focus of the problem and define different approaches we want to give it. It is also convenient to think about the objectives or the benefits we expect to obtain from a creativity session. This will help in the definition of an adequate focus. Secondly, we must define and invite the participants. About 6 to 8 people is usually an effective group. If the goal is to generate ideas from an objective that involves a specific area of the company, there should be members of the company present. In any case, the group should always be made up of people from different hierarchical levels. In the innovation, you should include the date and the duration. In the invitation, you should include the date, the duration, the place, the participants, the creative objectives and their relevance, the previous tasks, and naturally a thank you to go along with it for their participation and their effort throughout the day and for their work. Thirdly, we must introduce the topic. The meeting begins, led by a facilitator. After introducing ourselves, we will introduce the topic at hand in a summarized way. Fourthly, we have the clarification of information. Once the ice has been broken, we will share the information necessary to generate ideas on the topic at hand, and this will prevent us from wasting time later on. The next step is to explain the creativity objective. This is one of the key steps that sometimes goes unnoticed. The definition of the creativity objective or focus is a crucial step. The focus must be perfectly written in a single sentence. The next, we have explain the rules and roles of all the people present. We must now make it clear that we are looking for ideas that are both novel and valuable. This is the moment to produce ideas, to imagine. Anything goes. This is not to be crazy, but to give ourselves permission for a while to escape what is known from what has already been invented. During the generation of ideas, we must suspend judgment, seek quality, encourage reciprocal stimulation among the participants, make it clear that the ideas belong to everyone, and write down all the ideas that are generated. The facilitator is the one who will drive the process and encourage the teams to generate ideas, and the note takers to write down all the ideas that are mentioned. The next step is the icebreaker. We must break the ice. Next, it is a good idea to reduce the intensity a little bit with some mind techniques, games, or icebreakers that get the creative process flowing. And this leads us to the next step, which is the generation of ideas. So immediately after the icebreakers, we must return to the issue at hand. We must read again the objectives, and we begin with the generation of ideas. The first technique should always be brainstorming, so the most obvious ideas come out at the beginning. Keep in mind that sometimes ideas take a long time to come and uncomfortable silences can occur, but let's remember that patience is a virtue. One of the basic skills of the facilitator is to maintain the balance between fantasy and reality. When the group is generating ideas that are too crazy, the facilitator must tone it down, and when the ideas are too obvious, the facilitator must push the group slightly harder. Now, although it may seem fun, generating ideas is tiring. Between the application of the different program techniques, it is necessary to take breaks to rest the mind. The final step, if the group is still up for it, would be to have one final push at the generation of ideas. Normally, when we generate ideas, we tend to do it around the problem at hand. So what exactly do we mean by this? Generally, if you have a sales problem or a problem in the marketing department, you would generate ideas around the issues to try and find solutions to that particular problem. Hence, the importance of defining the creativity objective cannot be overstated. A creative objective is what we are going to generate ideas around. This approach is another key point to work on, since it allows us to approach the problem from a different perspective. In other words, it allows us to enter the problem from different entry points. Now, let us imagine that we're a hotel chain that has lobbies that are hard to differentiate from the standard hotel lobby. What can we do to make our hotel lobby stand out from the rest of hotel lobbies? I'll give everyone maybe 20 seconds or something to come up with a few ideas of how our hotel lobby could differentiate from the typical standard hotel lobby. Well, the normal thing would be to generate ideas that solve the design problem, i.e. our focus would be how to design a lobby that differentiates itself in the market and is more attractive to our guests. In reality, this focuses the problem statement, and defining the problem sometimes limits us from finding the best solutions. Defining, therefore, different approaches to the problem is going to allow us to approach the problem from different points of view, and these different perspectives help us find alternatives in greater quantity and higher quality. An example of a different approach to the creative focus might arise if we focus on the functionality of the lobby and ask ourselves to redesign the lobby, or what could be an alternative function for that lobby. How can we turn the lobby into something more than just a place where people check in and check out? Another focus could be, how can we create a space that is not only for tourists? How can we attract people that already live there and not just people from the hotel? Sometimes a very broad focus that at first seems not to be connected to the initial problem can help to generate totally innovative ideas, and this help to achieve the intended goal. An example of this focus could be, what ideas do we have to revolutionize the cultural scene of the city? How can our lobby in some way revolutionize this cultural scene? The definition of the right approach is often 50% of the success of the creativity session. So before starting the generation of ideas, it is advisable to spend a few minutes thinking about different approaches that help to generate more and better ideas. There are many creativity techniques that can be used. This table shows some of the best known creativity techniques. The creativity session consists of two phases. Firstly, we have the generation of ideas, and secondly, their evaluation. For each of these phases, different techniques are recommended. So, for example, for generalist objectives, we could recommend things such as brainstorming, mind maps, Scamper, and so on. Similarly, to redefine something, the following could be recommended. Again, we could use mind maps, brainstorming, maybe attribute listing, force relations. To perform a task or face a problem, we could implement maybe the why of things, provocations, analogies. To take advantage of an opportunity, again, maybe brainstorming, mind mapping, force relations. And to recognize something, maybe again, we could look at provocations, we could pick out analogies potentially, and so forth. With time and some experience, you can even fix several of these techniques and create or modify a new technique to suit your company's needs. Let us now take a quick look at the techniques to analyze ideas. So firstly, we have why. Why is a creative technique that consists of simply asking, well, why? So if we take an example of, let's say we own a restaurant that isn't doing particularly well, we might ask ourselves, people don't come to my restaurant anymore. Why? Well, because they're tired of the same food. Well, why? Because we haven't changed the menu in 5 years. Why haven't we done that? Because we don't want to try new things. And again, we'll ask ourselves, but why don't we want to try new things? And so on and so forth. The idea is to come up with an idea that approaches the problem from the root of the problem, or from another perspective that we did not take into account before. Then we have the analogies technique, which consists of solving a problem by means of a detour, instead of attacking it head on. We have mind mapping, which is a graphic technique that allows us to access the brain's potential. We have attribute listing, which consists of making a list of characteristics or attributes of the product or service to be improved, and then exploring new ways to change the function or improve each of these attributes. We have the technique of provocation, which requires constructing deliberately stupid thoughts in which something we have taken for granted about the situation is not true. The thoughts need to be stupid to jolt our minds out of pre-established ways of thinking. We have the SOWT analysis, which consists of describing the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of an idea, a problem, or a creative approach. The map it technique is an evolution technique which consists of making a list of criteria to evaluate ideas, then drawing a circle on a sheet of paper and dividing it into sections according to the selected criteria. Then we have the Walt Disney method, which is a technique of evaluating ideas that uses different phases. We have the dreaming, realistic, and critical stage. And finally, the creative problem-solving technique is a method that helps people redefine the problems they face, originate new and innovative ideas, and take action on them. So we're now going to take a look at two creativity techniques, which are very, very different from each other. We'll first take a look at the traditional brainstorming technique, which goes hand in hand with team storming. And then we'll take a look at a more disruptive technique known as the celebrity gallery, which we'll do together. So firstly, let's take a look at brainstorming. This technique is meant for the generation of creative ideas for a particular approach or objective to a business problem. We must do this type of exercise from time to time so that the moment of applying a creativity technique, we are able to generate many ideas in order to arrive at a more novel or original idea. If we repeat this type of warm-up exercise over several weeks, we will observe how the team evolves and will realize how the team is generating more and better ideas. It will be easier to see how to approach problems from different perspectives and come up with alternative solutions that no one has thought of before. Now, let's take a look at how we could go about doing a team storming exercise. Before starting with a team storming creativity technique, the focus should be written on a board and that should be displayed on a wall in the room, whilst post-it notes are distributed to the attendees. This is one way of going about the one I'm about to describe is one way of going about a team storming technique. There are many ways to do it, but I quite like this model. So the first step would be to write 2 ideas of the proposed focus on a post-it note and then stick it on the board around the focus, along with everyone else's. Then from those ideas that have been posted on the board, select 2 new ideas and generate a further 2 ideas from those ideas selected. And once again, repeat the process of sticking the post-it notes on the board. Then we would select 2 new ideas from the ideas generated, generate 2 further ideas, exaggerating the ideas from the previous set, and paste them on the board again around the focus. And then finally, we would repeat this process one final time. We would select 2 ideas and we would combine them to create one final idea and paste it on the board to see everyone else's answers. This way, we start from the most obvious ideas and hopefully incrementally, we can generate more exaggerate and more innovative ideas. And this leads us to the celebrity gallery. So I think this is a good one that we can all do together. So the first step is to create a list of famous people, either living or dead, real or fictional, that attract you for some reason or motivation. So if you want, I'll go first to show how it's done, and then everyone can do it as well. So let's pick 3 famous people, for example. I'm going to go with Albert Einstein, Queen Elizabeth, and Rafael Nadal. And now I'll give everyone maybe 20 seconds to have a think of 3 famous people that they want to choose. Okay, cool. I hope everyone has 3 people. The next step would be to write down thoughts and ideas that come to you, so attributes that relate to our famous people. Again, the more the better. No one's here to judge, and this is really a moment to go for it. So again, I'll use my example, and then I'll give everyone maybe 20-30 seconds to have a think of theirs. So if I were to take Albert Einstein, maybe an attribute of his which I'd admire is his intelligence. Maybe for Queen Elizabeth, I'd select her longevity. Obviously, I want my innovation idea to have longevity. I don't want it to die out within the first couple of months. And maybe with Rafael Nadal, I'd choose his resilience and his tenacity. Again, that willingness to keep going, even when people don't believe in you, or maybe when your first idea fails, that resilience to keep going and push on. So again, I'll give everyone maybe 20-30 seconds to maybe jot down some ideas or have a think of attributes relating to their famous person or famous people even. So from those ideas or that information that you've come up relating to your famous person, now the next step would be to select the one that you feel have the most potential both creatively and with focus on innovation. And then maybe the next step would be to have a quick pause, maybe 5-10 minutes, see if any new ideas come to mind. If any new ideas come to mind, terrific, write them down. And if not, then we can proceed with the ones that have come up with in the first part of that brainstorm. And that's sort of how the celebrity gallery would work. It's quite an out there way of thinking, but has nothing to do with the traditional brainstorming or teamstorming. So I think it's quite fun, and you definitely come up with very different ideas and different concepts. And to finally finish off this session, I want to quickly revisit orthodoxies with a particular focus on the 4 quadrants. So when trying to break an orthodoxy, we have to look at 4 different quadrants. We have competition, trends, orthodoxies, and unmet needs. Now, an orthodoxy that exists is that boardrooms and hotels are typically boring, depressing, uninspiring. How do you think we can go about breaking this orthodoxy? I'll give everyone maybe 15 seconds to have a think of how we could break this orthodoxy that boardrooms and hotels are boring, depressing, and uninspiring. Well, we're going to take a look at the example of the Hilton hotels. So the Hilton Hotel has come up with the Innovation Gallery, which serves as an incubator for innovative product developments. Due to its flexible design, the space also quickly became a top destination for meetings. Following the positive organic response, Hilton is currently working with other hotels to bring this concept to life. Hotels can select from different zone options to incorporate into their meeting space, all of which offer flexibility and encourage creativity and productivity. Some of these zones include a residentially inspired pantry, offering 24-hour access to snacks and beverages throughout the entirety of the meeting. A presentation theater, sitting within a sunken area with a large ceiling-mounted projector. This space would be perfect for executive presentations, for example, for board meetings and so forth. And finally, having collaborative spaces, having functioning smaller breakout areas. These spaces are ideal for smaller groups to host sessions outside of the presentation theater. And that takes us to the end of the first session on creativity and innovation. I hope everyone found that useful, and hopefully you'll tune into the second part, which I believe is tomorrow. So thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you, Jose, on behalf of everybody. Really appreciate it. And we hope you all enjoyed this session, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a great evening.
I would.
شكرا جزيلا للسيد خوسيه، شكرا جزيلا لكم ولحضوركم واستماعكم. نلتقيكم غدا بإذن الله في مثل هذا التوقيت في الجلسة الأخرى. شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.